Hello, and welcome to this week's it's fucking late episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast. A podcast
Not for the
where we
listener.
get our swear words out in the very intro, and therefore we don't have to get that explicit tag later on in the episode. Our intro.
Your name's David.
My name's David. Thanks, guys.
Wow. Wow, it is
It's been
late.
a while since we did a podcast.
Bravo.
My name's David.
Bravo.
And if you have one bucket with 2 gallons of water in it and one bucket with 7 gallons of water in it, how many buckets do you have?
All the buckets. I don't know. My name's Sam, and this film is what Reddit thinks is intellectual.
And I'm Ross. Idiocracy? What, like out of the toilet? Yes, exactly, out of the fucking toilet. That's what this
Out of
comes
the
from.
toilet. Out of the toilet. Welcome to this podcast when we talk about a particularly average movie that has taken over, I think, maybe white American male consciousness.
Men, yes. If you're a man of a certain age, this is certainly a movie for you. So we watched 2006's Idiocracy, directed and I think written in 2005
Yes.
by Mike Judge.
Yes, that's all
It's
things that are...
2006, Sam.
Oh, I thought it was 2005.
No.
Oh, I apologise. 2006.
Dare you shit all over me introducing the movie? See what I've
Well-
got to work with.
well,
we are
I-
already in 2505. Like,
Coming
what
in
is even
hot
happening
on this
here?
one. Coming in very hot.
I just thought that the success of your introduction thus far just needed to be tapered down a little bit. I just need to knock you down a
Sam,
peg.
sure. In the catalogue of my introductions to this podcast, I don't know why I'm doing a Shatner voice there. In the catalogue of my podcast introductions, that certainly would rank on the lower end in terms of coherence.
No, I thought it was way up there. I thought it was
about.
way up there, Dave. It's one of your
I think
best.
the energy was very good. And it was certainly better than this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Um,
Welcome to Inside Podcasting. So
Better
Idiocracy.
rating,
This is
sure.
this is a film that I picked in our selection criteria.
Shame.
Well, we had a film. We had to pick a film that we'd never seen, and I think this was possibly in that category as a film that I've heard lots about, and there's lots of memes, and like especially when Trump was elected, there was lots of kind of parallels because he was as stupid as possibly the people in this film, but never seen. So I think it's one of the it was a good one to tick off the list, and then immediately burn the list. And this movie, and never have
And
to
the TV.
consider it again. Yeah, and my house,
And the
the whole
house.
thing.
If you can figure out how to work matches after that. to be honest.
Yes.
So just round the horn here. So this is new for all of us, I think. I hadn't seen this movie either.
Same.
However, we're going to be talking mostly about Office Space in this episode. I feel like it's just going to
Yeah.
happen because this
Yeah.
movie is
I haven't
trash.
seen that either.
Mike Judge, he's responsible for Office Space, which is kind of like crosses over with this movie a little bit in terms of like it's kind of attacking that capitalist corporate sort of like lowest common denominator thing. However, that movie, and I've watched Office Space recently, is a really good movie with like really fun commentary and is also, and this is the key core thing, 2006 Mike Judge, like it's a good movie. Like there's a plot that runs from the start to the finish that's satisfying. This movie has none of that and is just a baffling Luke Wilson vehicle.
Yeah, I think what you need
It
to
meanders through, doesn't it?
Go on, Ross.
No, so I was just going to say, just to touch on your point of view, it just meanders through where I think for me this movie is the greatest sin of this movie is that it's such a missed opportunity. It could have been it could have been a movie that, would maybe be a contender for standing the test of time if they had better actors, better writers, and better producers. But just like what they were
Lighting,
talking about.
sound, catering.
I feel like the core bit of that, Ross, is money. Like, because I hate to tell Luke Wilson this because I'm sure he's fine. Let's not worry about Luke Wilson. He's got plenty of money. But like, the only reason you hire Luke Wilson is because you can't afford Owen Wilson. Like that's the only reason. Is like we want an Owen Wilson type, and we can't afford Owen Wilson. Who can we get? Oh, what about his dipshit brother who's only in shit movies? We can get him. It just means our movie will be shit, but is what it is.
Yeah.
I think this movie.
Fuck it, we don't have high hopes.
I think this movie is like, you really have to take yourself back to 2006, and I think it really shows how vapid like the culture was in the mid 2000s. Like we literally had a thing called the War on Terror. And that wasn't like a jokey thing that we all thought was a bit of a it was like, oh my god, how is the War on Terror going? Have we defeated have we defeated terror? I feel slightly terrified still. I mean, as I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or if we're just pumping up the terror. So, like, I think 2006 was just this I think void of culture.
Desert.
Yeah, and I think when we look back, and increasingly as we get further away from the mid 2000s, we kind of go, "Wow, that was really shit."
Wow.
We had Transformers movies, and we had like fucking shit like this. Like, it really was terrible. So I think this is maybe one of the ones that has just suffered so badly in the for the desert of time. Sand has just covered this up, and it's looking
blasted
shit.
it away.
Everything
I wonder,
looks shit.
Sam, is it purely like, because obviously we're looking at it through the lens of 2021 now, but is it one of those where it's like, what was this movie like? Because it wasn't sort of reviewed well, because like Dave sort of said to me before we started recording, it wasn't even promoted. But would this movie have even been considered a good movie back in 2006? Because it was just
it's hard to know.
So some of the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes are kind of like, well, this is a really good political satire, and this is intelligent and has a lot to say about like the rise of anti-intellectualism and stuff, which I'd really like to talk about that as a separate thing in a wee bit. Mm-hmm. But so there is that kind of impression that maybe this was considered to be quite good when it came out, and then as we've discussed, there is a lot of like cultural cachet that this film has with your kind of your Reddit users and people who think they are absolute geniuses because they've read some Ayn Rand or some like fucking horrible shit like that.
Stony masturbatey philosophers is how I refer to them in my head.
Yeah. So,
but before we get any further into this, because I think there's a lot of meat to be delved into here, guess what's
rancid meat. Rancid meat.
Rancid meat. Yep. There'll be some maggots down there.
Yes. So in this film, Idiocracy, Private Joe Bowers, a decisively average American, is selected as a guinea pig for a top-secret hibernation program, but is forgotten. Awakening to a future so incredibly moronic, he's easily the most intelligent person alive. As you say, Owen Wilson, Terry Crews, the one who I couldn't find her name, Maya Rudolph, who it was in Bridesmaids, I think, most recently, was one of the ones that I recognise her from. So, like, I don't think I have a problem with the cast necessarily. Cast's okay, isn't it? It's fine. Like, they all.
I mean, other than Luke Wilson, yeah.
Other than Luke Wilson, yeah. There's a. God, is this the time to talk about the production of this movie? I think it might be, and then we can get into the actual content of this literal shit sandwich without the bread, though. It's just more shit. So, in terms of this movie's production, it was made by Fox, I believe. Again, one of my glorious fact checkers will approve that.
You're right.
Made by Fox.
Yeah, whatever.
And basically, they made the movie. Reasonably low budget. I think it's cost $2 or $3 million. It wasn't a lot. It cost at all. Because you get Luke Wilson. He's showing up for a cheeseburger. Make that a meal, and he'll wear whatever you want. So it wasn't expensive to make this movie. And basically, Fox didn't like the final product. And Fox famously signs all these contracts with whoever to say they can basically do what they want, and then they rue the day when that person does what they want. So an example would be The Simpsons, who are constantly like dissing Fox or Family Guy, etc. They all have clauses that say you can say what you like. This movie had the same thing. They had a contract that said to Fox, "We'll deliver a movie. you will release that movie. That's fairly standard, fairly standard in this industry contract. And Fox did not want to release this movie, so it was a year late. It released to the minimum number of cinemas. There is I can't remember what the minimum is, but I think it's 70 cinemas in the US or something like that.
Yeah.
It released to the minimum number of small market cinemas. Absolutely no adverts, no trailers, zero marketing for this movie because Fox had to fulfill their contract, but did not want this movie, which contains multiple jokes about Starbucks selling hand jobs. They did not want Starbucks to see that. They did not want to be associated with it.
That is the funniest thing in the movie, I think, is all these, because the companies weren't asked. They weren't. It was obviously they weren't asked.
You mean they weren't jumping at this opportunity?
The marketing guys were like, "Yeah, Starbucks hand jobs, whatever you like, it's fine. No such thing as bad publicity." So yeah, there's a lot of like. I think the funniest thing in the film is the kind of like anti-corporate stuff, which is probably a good example of it. But
I tell you what got the probably the biggest, most genuine laugh out of me is how Fuddruckers, which is not a brand we have over here, but it's a funny word. Fuddruckers becomes buttfuckers over time. I just really got. Do you know what? That's the lowest brow joke in the world. But it really just got a laugh out of me.
You know what's funnier? What's funny about that? And this is where like maybe we have shit on this movie quite a lot. Up in the first 11 minutes of this podcast,
we will continue to do so.
We will.
Yeah,
but I
don't think we're being too harsh here. Come on.
Can we maybe and then let's get into some of the content. But can we maybe consider a few things that we do like? Because I actually think some of the writing of this is relatively like it's pretty funny. There are funny jokes, and that one there, that Fuddruckers one, is a good example of they went from they could have gone from Fuddruckers to buttfuckers straight away, but the gradual development towards that, and I can't remember example of like maybe Fuckruckers or something.
I think it was like Muttruckers and stuff like that. There, like it gets closer and closer to.
It's just like a fun like little degeneration of it, and the anti-corporate stuff in this movie. Talking about things we like is kind of the only thing I like. Like so that and by the way, this movie being made 10 years later. This is an Amazon warehouse, not a Costco.
But and then it wins an Oscar like Nomadland.
Yeah, they go to the big Costco where everything is. There's loads of jokes about Starbucks, Fuddruckers. I'm sure there are other examples of stuff in here. The Brauno, the drink that's like Gatorade or Mountain Dew.
I was going to bring up
like analog thing. That's funny. I like the anti-corporate like thing. The idea that. And we'll get
they bought the FDA and the FCC.
These corporations. Yeah. Well, the FDA and the FCC wouldn't let them do this, so they just bought them. And I'm like, America.
Yeah. Which again, like when we're saying like, these are the people who are drawing comparisons between the 2016 election and Idiocracy. That's the sort of stuff that checks out. Where basically, like you had the Flint, Michigan thing, and basically, I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but when all the people were getting this like garbage, literal, poison water, but also I can't remember the name of the car manufacturer, but there was a car manufacturer.
Ford.
A quick Google search will tell you Ford, and they had a dealership there, but obviously they were using water for applying some of the enamel stuff, and it was fucking up their production. So what did they do? They gave the Ford manufacturing company their own supply pipe from the good water. Everyone else still drinking literal fucking poison. But we got to look after the corporations. There's your own water pipe, guys.
Yeah.
Have you watched that Michael Moore documentary, Ross?
No.
Yeah, absolutely amazing watch. So good, good, so shocking.
Michael Moore gave us money.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and that's the fucking norm. Do you know what I mean? Like, our people are dying, but our donors aren't making money.
And that's where this movie kind of like hits the nail on the head. And I would posit just now that the only moments where the movie is like poignant and like clever and saying something are the voiceovers. It's when we step away from this fucking Luke Wilson, Maya Rudolph fucking running around like talking about hand jobs and making jizz jokes. Like whenever we get away from that, like this movie kind of breathes a little bit and like it can have a little funny joke. That's clever. That's been well thought of. That is satire. I don't think Luke Wilson walking around being the cleverest man in the world, but also still being Luke Wilson, is particularly satiring anything.
No,
you know,
no.
other than maybe Owen Wilson. Like again, like Luke Wilson is a satire of Owen Wilson.
And we've spoken about how clever we are, you know, almost on a daily basis, right? But we also, as intellectual titans that we definitely are, we also
really enjoyed butt fuckers. Like,
we love a good dick
Two
joke.
things can exist at the same time.
Like so if anyone's listening to this thinking, oh, these towering intellects just don't understand. Yeah, no. We're stupid as fuck, and we know it, and we'll enjoy a shitty, you know.
That fucking horse is neighing again. Because you have to hear it on the podcast.
There's a horse neighing.
They're just about to reach the very pinnacle of his point, and there's Dave. Oh, the horses are back. Shut the fuck up about the horses.
I don't think the listeners will be able to hear that, but if they can, that's very exciting. Maybe you shouldn't podcast from a barn, is my suggestion to you, though.
Sam would like to apologise to the entire county of North Yorkshire for his statements.
Fuck them.
Ross, on the other hand,
I forgot what my point was, but I think it was that we're stupid and we like stupid jokes as much as anyone. Now, you're totally right about Luke Wilson running around being like an idiot. It's kind of like it's all these different threads, and that's the thing with this film, going away from the things that we liked rather quickly. The thing with this film is that it's just too much of everything, isn't it? Like there's not really a lot going on. It's an incredibly short runtime of 1 hour 24 minutes, which I know you guys will have appreciated.
Thankfully,
it feels longer than that.
But it does feel longer. But because I think there is just there's just 10 different ideas here crammed into this tuna can, and we're not really given like any space to explore either of them because it's just so fast paced, but not in a kind of like Family Guy joke type of way, you know, that kind of machine gun of jokes. You don't get that. It's just kind of a lot of lingering, and it's not particularly satisfying.
It meanders a lot. Like I've said at the start of this episode, it meanders. Yeah.
So the plot of this film then is this librarian, this idiot, this the most kind of useless, boring man in.
It's not even that, Sam. He is the most
average guy. Most average guy.
Yeah. So he's the most average. So he gets frozen and for a year. But what they just like see what happens. Is that kind of the premise of this?
To see if they could do it, I think.
The idea is that the and again, like there's some writing in the first bit of this movie, less so later, but we'll get into that. They're like, all right, so we think we're not what basically is we're not at war right now, and that's terrible. The US, whenever
America, almost historically, that is the case.
We're not at war right now, and it's terrible because all of these people who are great at war are getting old. But what if we could like freeze all of these generals and soldiers and tacticians, etc., and then just unfreeze them in case of war in 6 months? Possibly 8 months. I mean, who knows how South America is going to go?
These poor soldiers will be suffering from awful post-traumatic stress disorder if we leave them for a second.
But then,
for one second,
possibly the most unbelievable part of this movie, they feel like they have to what's the word? Be ethically above board when they're selecting people for this experiment. So this guy has no family, whatever, he's a loser. But guess what? We don't have a single woman we can do anything like that. So we're going to buy a hooker. Buy a hooker who is going to be played by Maya Rudolph in this movie, and she's going to get frozen because we need a woman as well. But of course, can't just I don't know the US like abduct somebody
and this woman because does she have family? I can't remember if they say that she has family.
They specifically state that she doesn't have. Similarly to Joe, she doesn't have family. She did, however, have a pimp called Upgrade who they had to deal with. Like,
I love the spelling of that.
I do love the spelling of that. That's funny.
I don't. Like, you guys say, like, oh, this is where there was some writing. There fucking isn't, man. Like, you could have written a woman in the army. Do you know what I mean? You do not need to make this like wider joke. Well, we got a prostitute. And then the general had to party with the pimp to
I
work.
agree, Ross. But like, it feels like. You are right, because it feels like this woman is a prostitute only so that we can have these funny pimp jokes, which I think it's a rapper or something who plays the guy. I don't know. I'm not big
don't
up.
know.
You
Funnily
don't even
enough,
see
some
him.
of us are.
You see him in
I don't know.
slideshows. That's it.
You see
I
him at the
did
end. There's a
like
post-credit scene.
I did like the slideshow.
You
Slideshow
stayed
was
for the
funny.
post-credit scene. You stayed for the fucking post-credits.
No, I just didn't reach
You
the
are a
remote
glutton
fast
for
enough,
punishment, my
Ross.
friend.
Is there a post-credit scene? I didn't even know.
There's a
I did
post-credit
like.
scene of Upgrade getting out of one of these sleep pods in the future and like saying, "Oh, I'm going to go and find that bitch because she owes him money."
Jeez,
As soon as the credits came up, I got the lighter fluid out. Just sprayed it on the wall.
you endangered your wife and family
My son was asleep.
just to make sure that we don't have to experience
Kill it.
Yeah,
Kill it with fire.
So I know what you're saying, Ross. I know what you're saying, Ross, but I think that's like there are good examples of this. I did like the slideshow bit. I thought that was funny, like his descent into, this like very straight white guy turning into this, with the women on his arms and all this stuff. It made me laugh in a sense of
There were some
yeah.
funny jokes there.
I think that's an example. I think that's an example of looking at it through the 2021 lens because it's predictable. Only because you'll have seen it in other movies. If it was out in 2006, maybe that would have been funny. So, credit where credit's due partially.
What I would say is I think a lot of these things are funny in a vacuum. And like a lot of comedy struggles with this is like a lot of these individual things, like Luke Wilson's lawyer being a moron, like that's funny. But maybe not in that scene where everyone else is a moron. And like the president, very funny. The cabinet, again, it's all funny on its own in a vacuum, not connected to any of the rest of this. But when it's just constantly the same joke again and again and again, so this early bit, like these non sequiturs are amusing because they're funny. But like if we were watching it happen, it wouldn't be funny. It's because it would just be always bogged down in this kind of sameness of this movie.
And I think overall, I think it's pulling its punches a lot of the time. I think it's kind of like the commentary. So yeah, we've got this corporate thing, which I don't think it pulls its punch at all. We've got it
goes quite hard on that, which fair play.
Yeah, US military is unethical, but again, it's like it's all a bit of a joke. But the actual like main thrust of the movie, and then and so when Luke Wilson arrives in the future, and he ends up, through some accident being the smartest man there, and that's what they all figure out. Now, this is the bit that I don't think it ever really connects, is the idea of him being so intelligent and everyone else being so thick. And like the anti-intellectual stuff, which is kind of, it's in the fucking title of the film, the anti-intellectual stuff never really sells to me. Like they never really lean into it in the sense of like why has this happened? How has this happened? What's the lesson for us in?
It's
in,
the more.
Sorry,
it's the
just
more
finish.
problematic. Sorry,
What's the lesson for us to take away from it? And that's the thing that it never resolves. It just sort of goes.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't resolve it, Sam, because it feels like it's at the start, Ross. Like what it's saying is that stupid people breed stupid people, which is like there's a conversation to be had there. Like
yes,
that bit is funny on the face of it, but like when you think about it, you're like, so.
And this is why I think it
are breeding, and only clever people can have clever children, right?
And this is why I think it's attractive to so many of these, fedora tipping, fucking like losers on Reddit or whatever. Yeah, totally. Because it's this like superiority complex thing, isn't it? And you kind of, I kind of read it as a bit of a class judgment as well, because there's also a lot about like listening. They mention classical music and stuff, and like as if that's a measure of your worthiness or whatever, as opposed to watching. Well, admittedly, the masturbation channel, which with that got a laugh at me. That was very funny. Also, the violence channel.
That didn't get a laugh from me. What got a laugh from me was like when he put that channel on, and he got what made me laugh was when he knocked at the door and he goes, "Go away, bitten."
Like there are lines in this.
He's got like a toilet chair. There's a flush on the side of his
toilet chair.
Well, toilet chair.
but it's the kind of like the spectacle of it, isn't it? It's a spectacle of it that is funny, as opposed to necessarily like. So where are we going? You know, are we just going to have jokes about how stupid people are, or are we actually going to like? We actually going to try and tie the knot on this and say something about it? Like, what's the lesson?
Jokes for how stupid people are. I think seems to be the resounding. Yeah, we're just going to have jokes about how stupid they are.
Yeah. So it's this. You know, when you see when he lands in the future, and we get the Back to the Future-esque walking around, looking at things. Dun, dun, what's happened here? Oh no! Look at this. This is different. Like we get to see Luke Wilson doing that, and it's kind of fine. Like it's fine. It's fun, you know. And there's quite a lot of good visual gags. Some stuff that kind of makes you laugh a little bit. But I don't necessarily think any of even the set design of it. You can see that this cost $2 million. You know, it does not look.
There's
good.
A lot of bad CG whenever we pan out from like the back lot in Los Angeles that we're filming this on. Like whenever we pan out, it's like, oh, it's those mountains of garbage that aren't even hand drawn. These are like, you know, bad CGI. And again,
that's another thing it does.
The production budget.
Does very well. But that's another like a point it illustrates very well. They obviously have the anti-corporate bullshit, and just the sheer volume of pollution and just again, it's another one. Okay, fair enough. Upon retrospection, actually, yeah, maybe it did get a few more things right than I initially thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't exactly remember where it is in the film, but I'm just remembering the scene where we get the two couples. One of them is middle class and well-to-do, and they're going to.
Oh, that's the very beginning.
That's the very beginning, yeah. Right? So we have that bit, and this is your kind of framing of the movie, isn't it? And from there, we also see the poor people. let's call it what it is. The poor people who are like, just popping kids out because I didn't know.
Sam, you've missed a bit. You're like, aren't they disgusting? Procreating. Oh.
So the idea is that all these poor stupid people are having loads of kids, and the rich ones, or the wealthy ones, or the more wealthy ones at least, are deciding not to, and then one of the husband dies or something, because
that also got a laugh out of me where she's like, well, obviously John died of cancer last year, and I frozen some eggs. I'm going to find someone. I'm going to find a guy.
She's twitching her ring like she's so. And that's like the starting point of the film, and so from there you just think, oh right, okay, that's where we're going. That's the starting point, is actively blaming those.
That's the line we're walking
for having all those kids, as a and that's the kind of. And I think if you'd maybe come at it from a bit more of a, maybe a bit more of a left wing view of like, what about the system that's creates all this shit? Like, what about all the... Yeah. It's not just blame the victim here, which is like... And they kind of do it because they also want to talk about capitalism as well. And then they want to talk about the stupidity of the leadership and the army. And like, again, there's all these threads going on. And you're like, well, this is a fucking mess. This film's a mess. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's trying to be all fucking hoity-toity and clever and, ugh.
It's just very shallow, in my opinion, in terms of the way it portrays all these things, because it's not really given any major thought to. Obviously, and we really can't get into pedant cast about how this future would work at all, but it really hasn't given any thought to like.
Yes, thank you, because that was killing me.
It's not just that like the society wouldn't work. It's like, how do these people, even clothe themselves? And again, like, there's a lot to be said there, and I'm sure. But it's by choosing to have this movie 500 years in the future. If this movie is just like, it's 80 years later and we're still relying on 2010 computers to run everything, fine. Like, people are this stupid, no problem. But it's a bit much. And I guess that's fine, though, because you just kind of have to ignore that because it's the backdrop. And again, this movie does not have the time or the money to be making it any better. Yeah. And maybe enjoy some of the jokes that are peppered throughout. So one of the that's good is Terry Crews is the president, obviously. And he's the president.
I'll say right here, right now, I love Terry Crews. Terry Crews is amazing. He could do no wrong. Continue.
Yeah, he is
Absolutely. And he is like a he's a famous ex wrestler who's like, well, I'll be president then because he's a wrestler.
And
And
porn
it's like
star.
that got a laugh. Yeah, and porn
Yeah.
star, yes, and porn star. Just
And
like
the-
Donald Trump.
Yeah, and well, exactly. And this is
Literally.
maybe where we have to give the film quite a lot of credit for
Some
predicting
props.
or at least understanding the trajectory of the Republican Party. I don't know if they ever say which party this guy's from, but it doesn't think it matters. But either way, going from George Bush, who has now been like fucking turned into this elder statesman of an ex-president. Oh, what I mean,
Comparatively.
George, obviously he had his difficulties, but at least he had some integrity. At least he was a thoughtful man. Fuck you. You were as much of a piece of shit as Trump was. Trump is probably better at it than you were. So that's totally weird. But then we get Obama, who was the professorial president and all this stuff, and then we fall into Trump naturally. So to predict that a good 10 years before it happened is quite funny, and it's now I think you can see where this film came back in the 2016, and people were like, "Look at this! See, it happened! It happened! It wasn't just the Simpsons that predicted this."
I like the congressional things. I like when Terry Crews is like doing a speech and he's like, "Yeah, well, fuck them, and we're gonna fucking fix everything." And I'm like, kind of exactly what the US leaders are doing. And he starts firing a machine gun to get everyone's attention. And he's like, "We're gonna fucking solve it, and it's gonna be fucking dope." And all of this, and I am cutting out so many slurs, by the way, just in this interpretation here. And I'm like, actually, that is where this movie is good at satire, and it is like a commentary on the political system that exists now, and that's where I think it does the best work, are in those scenes. Also, Luke Wilson isn't opening his mouth, and that really just
helps
sells any scene for
Is
me.
it satire though? Because it's like satirical. It's so far out there.
It was satire 15 years ago, Sam. Not so much now when we're living in it.
Yeah,
we've lived through that.
I love
we've lived through Donald Trump tweeting that he's going to drone strike Florida. We've lived through that, so therefore this is no longer satire. It's just like
when he said he was going to nuke, or when he said he was going to nuke a hurricane.
Yeah,
nuke
exactly.
When he incited a mob to attack the foundations of American democracy, like that.
Yeah. I mean, I thought we were going to have a few more to build up to that one, Sam. That was going to be the last one, because I was going to say, how he told people to inject bleach.
Like I said,
take the house.
Makes this movie seem like reality TV, and therefore it's not funny. It's like, well, you're just telling it how it is. In 2006, though, like pre-Obama, this is kind of like still a bit like there's this shred of dignity in the political system where people at least like pretend they are politicians and not just billionaires having a laugh.
Grab them by them, whatever. I loved House of Representing. I thought that was a fucking quality joke.
And the fucking medallions they're wearing, like for each position.
House of Representing.
The production design in this is generally pretty poor, but like again, I quite liked little touches like that.
But it's a sight gag.
Hang on, I think the execution is poor. I think the design is actually. I want to choose my words right here. I think the design, what they were going for, could have been good, but obviously, like you said, Dave, they had fuck all budget, so the execution is poor. I think what they were striving for could have been a lot better.
Yeah.
There's also a couple of things, like the movie that everyone's watched. The number one movie in America is just called Ass.
It's just 90 uninterrupted minutes of an ass.
Just I got it. There's some things that I think if this was in an episode of Family Guy or whatever, you kind of crude comedies, like it's quite funny. Like it's a funny concept.
Again, Sam, in a vacuum, it's funny. As a cutaway gag in Family Guy, it's funny. In a 90-minute linear movie, not so much.
Ass, the number one starring film starring Luke Wilson. Like, fucking, that's a funny joke. That is a funny joke, it may be to that point of where does it fit in the rest of the films? Jigsaw. And speaking of which, as I segue seamlessly, the kind of B plot in this with Rita running around doing her thing, this seems to me an enormous amount of padding. Like there just seems loads and again, this movie's an hour and 24 minutes long, and yet we're left with just loads of scenes, just her kind of just doing random stuff, and I really wonder. Well, I think it must just be there just to fill time, because to have a kind of another arc for us to follow, and not really, because she doesn't do anything. She doesn't have a particular amount to do.
Unfortunately, it's 2006, so we don't have to give a woman a proper arc, but she does have to have screen time and wear ever tighter tops.
Yes, yeah. So it's just one of those things of oh god, there's really not a lot here to play with, and I think that even talking about it as a movie, it's kind of well, other than just talking about sight gags, where do you go? It's such a shallow film that doesn't really want to delve into itself.
Well,
and
part of me wonders how much of this is added, those scenes in particular. Is added sort of post sort of filming or on the cutting room floor or whatever, just so they can get the voiceover in, because without the voiceover you would not get as much as what's going on in this movie, as what you would get otherwise. So I think because
I don't think it's reshoots or anything like that. I think it's intentional that they're doing this, Ross. But I think it also leads directly from the fact that I'm not just going to have a go at Luke Wilson the entire time I'm speaking on this podcast, I promise. But
Dave feels about Luke Wilson the way I feel about Orlando Bloom.
He's just not good. I'm sure Luke Wilson as a supporting actor, is perfectly okay, but he's a lot to hang your movie on, and he basically does that. I don't know, I'm just a guy, and there's nothing about him in this movie, and part of that is the writing, and part of that is just Luke Wilson being dreadfully bland. And so the voiceover is kind of yes, I think they wanted it to have that kind of I did this, or they wanted to have that feel anyway, but I think they were also forced to do that because you don't get anything from what Luke Wilson's doing in terms of why he's doing what he's doing or what he wants. So you have to have the voiceover say, and so he's gone to find the time machine because he really wants to get home, because you wouldn't get that from his performance. You'd be like, is this guy stoned? Has he been hit in the head?
Yeah, and you kind of, again, maybe it is a budgetary thing, as you say, Dave. But you do, if you want to have a character in this who's going to lead you your way through, and who's going to be, he has a lot to do, really. There's quite a lot for him to actually do as a character, and to drag the story out. He becomes Secretary of the Interior or something like that. There's
Secretary of House.
Which is quite funny. It's quite funny when he's brought in and he goes to the White House and there's all these idiots there. There's a guy, the kid who won becoming Secretary of Agriculture on a game show or something like that, or a cereal box. Whatever it is that he managed.
Sarah Rue is the Secretary of State, I think, the woman with the red hair, and she's uncredited in this movie, which usually means she refused to have her name in the credit of this movie.
Right.
Wow.
I can imagine.
But I feel like there are bigger names who are still credited in this movie. I feel like, come on, Sarah, just put your name on this thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, Sarah, stay strong. You made the right call, Sarah.
Yeah. And then we get a kind of purpose for Luke Wilson, which is to figure out the agriculture crisis, which again we never really learn about, and is kind of a bit another thread, another thing tacked onto this movie of so there's a dust bowl and we're gonna try and resolve that. I don't think it's that funny that they're using Gatorade or whatever it is to.
It's funny the first time, but when it becomes the major plot in the movie that water feeds crops, it's kind of
yeah.
Again, to echo you, Dave. Again, in isolation. Oh, that's quite. Oh yeah, But then if that becomes one of the main plot points of the movie, and just
the joke.
But the thing is, when you go into when you go into pedant cast then, because they're like, oh, what? Because when you say, oh, use water, and like, what? Like out of the toilet? So water is still being used for something. So I don't understand. This is what I mean. Like, yeah, you think you're being funny, but if water still has a use, like, why not have Gatorade to flush your toilet as well? Because you don't want to waste it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Like,
it falls
right,
apart
Ross.
as soon as you begin tugging on it.
Exactly, but like I think the water thing, like it exists to have that joke about brawn, whatever it is, brawny. Like
yeah.
It's to have
It
the
has
joke about them
electrolytes.
buying the FDA. Like it has electrolytes. What plants want?
Yeah.
And like that again, that's funny. Again, like it's all funny, but like you said, Ross, the foundation of that is kind of like that's way too big a plot point for this.
Crumbly.
Like, way too big.
And so let's go to our usual tactic when we're just talking about all things. How do we fix this film? What do we do to fix this movie to make it more cogent, to make it more interesting? I don't think it's about making it funnier. Hold on, I don't think it's about making it funnier. I think it's about maybe just trying to figure out what we need to take away, perhaps, rather than necessarily add. So I've filled now enough for you to have considered that question and to reply with cogent thoughts. Now.
I have something. I had something when you first started talking. I tried to interrupt.
Well, it was a waste of fucking my time then, wasn't it?
Well, I tried, Sam, but you wouldn't fucking be told. So fuck you. So in this, for me, this movie is resolved. All of this makes sense if you have the voiceover say it's now 25:05. People are so stupid that society would have collapsed if the technology from such and such a date, which automates everything, didn't exist. And you could be like, well, the computers run the hospital, they run the police. They basically just tell people what to do. Like, do you know what I mean? They get all their food from terminals. Robots harvest all the crops. Like, if you had a scene where you said, like, everything is automated, and that's what allows these people to be this stupid, it wouldn't fix this movie. It wouldn't make this movie funnier, but it would make it, like, more cogent. Because all these humans going around having these demolition derbies, like, trying to run the country but not being able to do it, like, would make sense if you establish that a computer is harvesting the crops, is feeding these people, is making the clothes, is telling the police who to arrest. Like, and it is, I will say, I think that is what's happening in this movie, in the background of it. But like, if there was a scene that said that, like, people are so stupid, and it's like, and then the film could be like, this supercomputer is breaking down, and we need to fix it, and then that could be something for Luke Wilson to do. Is like, actually, what we need to fix is the computer that makes sure all these idiots don't starve to death. And like, it maybe give you a bit more of unity in this film, and a bit more like, it would allow for you to have people this stupid.
Your credence as a script doctor for Hollywood continues to rise.
That's a very good solution, Dave. Yeah.
Do you know why it's a good solution? Because you're basically describing the plot of WALL-E.
Story.
Yeah,
a much better movie with a more charismatic lead.
a robot
that doesn't talk, an animated robot that doesn't speak.
Yeah.
I'm crying, Sam. I'm crying.
Can only say its own name, like a Pokemon.
Luke Wilson.
Luke Wilson. Luke.
You're totally, and this is the first thing that hit me is like WALL-E. So WALL-E, this film, which again, it's like a very, very different style and all that stuff. But if you go to the core thing of humanity has failed, and what we're left with is these idiots. WALL-E's a bit more like they're just fat, which is their shortcut, I think.
Well, hang on,
I reckon
because you have. Well, what it did for me, like, I was getting WALL-E vibes from as well. But number one was because the pollution, and you had that, like, those sunset, those dusk visuals of like just mountains of trash, and then you had the things where, like, that where you see what's his name, Frito, the lawyer, and he's in that massive chair that's also his toilet. That's what gave me WALL-E vibes more than anything. It was the chair, because they spend their whole lives in those fucking recliners.
Yeah, which is really funny, and that's and the stuff with the president of by and large, Fred Willard, the late Fred Willard, in fact, him saying, but don't worry, the robots have got it. he takes a breath of the oxygen mask. Everything's gonna be. We're gonna give it a couple of years and we'll come back. And that was 30 years later. Like, it's really funny and it's satirical and it's also not like really mean. And they have all these pathetic people with their, they can't even walk and they don't talk to each other and they just get every will is met.
Catered for. Yeah.
All of this is the same stuff, but there's just like this different take. And I think, Dave, that your idea of having like this central problem for us to figure out and for the character to figure out is much more compelling than use water on crops, which is just like, it doesn't do enough, does it? It doesn't fill the hole that this movie
typical
is.
Things, Sam, in Hollywood, where like I think they had half a good idea for this movie. Like, I think they had a really good opening. They were like, I think they had that, like, oh, well, what if only stupid people had kids? Or I think that comes from a very troubling place, I think, in the way that certain people look at, and you're right, Sam, and there is a class aspect there in the way that certain people look at things like, oh my God, they've got so many kids, they can't even afford them. Like, and that's not very far away from literally being Hitler. So watch yourselves, internet.
Well, that's it. Yep.
Yeah, like, that's not very far away from eugenics, and that's the more troubling part of this movie. But I think that, like, wherever that came from, I think that's the seed of this idea, is that, like, actually, I'm honestly, a lot of it's incel stuff. The thought process is, I'm really clever, I'm really attractive, why aren't I getting any sex?
Yeah.
Obviously, people having sex are morons, and everyone's just a moron, and I'm really clever. And so what if everyone was really stupid because they weren't sucking my dick, which is what would save humanity? That is what the seed of this movie comes from. That's as far as it goes. That is as far as it goes. And then they're like, right, well, we've got to write a movie. We've got fucking minute 14 where they're in the pods. And then the rest of it is just a series of like, hey guys, what if we got higher shit and we just said things that we think are funny and we wrote all of that down and then we just gave that to a director to film it?
Yeah. Well, but when you compare this to Office Space, which is which is a good film. It's it's a fun film, but it has the same kind of like exceptionalism thing, doesn't it? These guys are they're too clever to enjoy their salaries.
That movie's a lot less mean, though, Sam.
It's
a lot less aggressive in terms of like who the bad guys are corporations in that movie, whereas the bad guys in this movie are people for being stupid.
Yeah,
and I think that like it's nicer in that way. And I think that that's why that movie holds up better. Also, like I said, it's a better made movie. But like, I think the theme is generally like this one guy being like, I don't want to work for a corporation because I'm wasting my life. And, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't, it doesn't necessarily click in that same way, does it? Whereas I think Office Space has this like crystallized idea and then it's just about executing that. Whereas the idea in this is really... What's the idea of this? Is it that there's ecological failure? Is it this guy's the smartest man ever? Is it that people are stupid? Is it that there's like some, as you say, vaguely Nazi genetics ideas about people being impure or whatever? There's a lot. Just so many. Where's the starting point? Where's the starting point for this? And there
was one thing I said that I can't remember if it was like if we were recording at the time or not, but. One of the main reasons that I really dislike this movie is because it feels like just such a missed opportunity. We've gone over numerous times now about how they've touched on a couple too many things and they've missed the mark with each one. And to answer your earlier question, Sam, how I fix this movie is pull some things out of it. You know what I mean? You want to save the economy. You want to save agriculture. You want to save somehow humanity as well as the city, as well as yourself and the presidency. Pull a lot of those back. Go basic. How to help people and things like that. I mean, you looking through the movie. I don't know if you noticed, but things like the White House, it was in such a state of disrepair. Yet people's apartments was in such a better state. And you just think, there's so many inconsistencies, when you have things where people are making money, and that's where it comes down to money. The White House wouldn't be in that state of disrepair because corporations would be looking after the White House because they're keeping those guys in the money. If you're going to pin it on one thing, I would keep the anti-corporate sort of sentiment, because that got a lot of laughs, and keep that thing, even though we were against it, but I would keep that thing about that, what are they called, brawn water or whatever it is, or brawnator.
Yeah.
The Gatorade, keep that, because then you have the big bad company that you can point the finger to and go,
But
this is the bad guy.
You maybe need to see the big bad company. You maybe need to see this really lush, nice, very pretty, like everyone's very urbane and smart and well dressed corporate headquarters. And what actually then becomes is a dystopia where you have all these poor people who are doing question mark things, and like basically everyone else is just reaping the fat off that. But there isn't anyone winning in this. It's just everyone's too stupid to even profit off the backs of people stupider than them.
But another good thing, great point the movie made, maybe unknowingly, was by saying, and this is where Amazon sort of comes into it as well, as it was by saying that half the population of America was employed by this company, and when you stopped using them, all these people lost their jobs overnight. And I think they stumbled on that, to be honest. I don't think that was there was a lot of thought on that. And just those are the sorts of things you could do. And like you said, Sam, maybe not funnier, but it would pack a much bigger punch, I think.
My fix is down the lines of figure out who you're taking aim at. Like who do you want to take down when you're making your movie? If you're going to write something as polemical as this, if you're going to write something that's about really shining the light on the injustices in the world, or whatever it is you want to do, who you're taking down, and it doesn't feel like they're really trying to take down anyone who has any substantial power. I mean, the politicians would be the one that you would think that you could do, and that actually, if the politicians were the smart ones, if they were the ones who managed to create, because
they're the ones with the money.
Yep. As perhaps we have seen in real life, to create a system, a media, oligarchy where everyone is just sat watching America's Next Top,
America's Next Top,
whatever.
Stop talking. That's it.
That's a good joke, actually, isn't it? Yeah, America's Next Top, whatever opiate for the masses that they want to pump out, and thus,
opiates, most likely.
Opiates. Opiates are the opiates of the masses. But there's if you create a target, and I think probably politicians is the better one than necessarily, the Hollywood elite. You could do that as well, but just not have it about just people just having too many children, because that's the bit for me. It just starts off and it's probably why it's so popular with these wanky people. But start from that point of the politicians have done this to us, and so when we're reflecting back and we see ourselves in the mirror, sat there with our remote control eating fucking Cheetos, it's not because we're lazy, or it's because we're so fucking knackered that we can't actually think for ourselves. We can't actually think outside of our current situation and think about bigger issues, think about how we want to maybe change things in society or our lives or whatever else, because we're too fucking tired and we're repressed. That to me is way funnier than necessarily starting from poor people. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, just like you, Sam, that's how the movie started off for me, and it got off right on the wrong foot with me, because I don't consider myself poor, I don't consider myself rich, but the one thing that I detest is basically, whether you're looking at Brexit or whether you're looking at, the Trump election, is when you sort of talk down to people who, will go against, what normally would be what you would think is the logical decision to make. And it's not because they're stupid, but it's like you just said, Sam, there's the media oligarchy. And when you're put inside that echo chamber and this is the way to go, everything else is bullshit, do this, you're not the one who's hypnotized. Not that anyone's hypnotized, but it's when they're
not yet.
When they're molded a certain,
keep watching, keep listening,
Viva la resistance. This is the voice of the Mr. Runs. But when they're
nice Captain Scarlet reference.
Thank you very much. But when they're sort of told to think like this over and over, it's whether they're tired or whether it's not because they're stupid, but that's what's been implanted in them. and so it's not their fault. And like, I'm coming across as condescending here, but like, whether it's people who vote a certain way, or whether it's flat earthers, it's not because they're stupid. It's just because when you go down a certain avenue, the people who want you to think that way, it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole.
And you are right, Ross. And this movie kind of touched on bits of that. Like, not, I don't get, like you said, I don't think intentionally, but like we have where they say, oh, it's got what plants want. It's got electrolytes. It's what plants want, and they keep repeating that. That's kind of like a great example of like, if the media is telling you, oh, it's got what plants want electrolytes, and that's all you've had for your entire life. Of course, that's what you think. And so there is this, and you are right. There is this disparity now, and especially even in 2006, of like, yes, there's a certain segment of people who are educated enough to think really, really little of anyone who is of poorer educational, poorer socioeconomic background to them, while simultaneously not realizing that it's the people who are wealthier than you and who are in higher socioeconomic circles who have all of the resources and all of the money. Like, it's this real, like, and there is an anger there, and that kind of, I've just lost the point of this entirely. But
it's like almost like a liberal view, and like as if, oh yeah, it's like I'm on the left. It's like, actually no, because the idea of liberalism is very different to actually a more socialist view. And I think there's this like line here that we're crossing between, it's just separating poor people out into different groups, and we're going to try and resolve issues, but we're not really going to kind of do much about it, because actually I want to protect what's my own. So there's loads of like political subtext that exists within the view that you're describing,
but not within this movie.
Exactly.
Because this movie literally is not clever enough to have even thought about any of that.
It doesn't give a shit.
It really isn't. If you told me, and I'm fairly sure he isn't, but if you told me Mike Judge was 22 years old when they were in this movie, I'd be like, oh yeah, that checks out. I believe that. Yeah, college graduate. Yeah, he knows everything. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No, he's got one more. He's got one more year left, and he feels just like he
knows everything. He doesn't need to even do his last year.
He's figured everything out, and we're maybe and very probably. We shared some of these views, maybe.
Yeah.
When we were younger, like I think perhaps
in 2006, I probably, probably really would have loved this movie.
Yeah.
I probably would have been like, oh yeah, this is a really cool movie. Oh yeah, this is how I think. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I shudder to think sort of what my mindset was like, like 15 years ago, and for me, it's probably far too late where I sort of realized to go, hang on, it's the fuckers with the money that cause all this shit. Yeah. Follow the money and you'll find the cunt. That's my philosophy.
And you will find the criminal. The person holding all the money, they've done some shit. But I think we've been left-wing enough. I actually want to maybe like circle back just slightly. And like, is there anything that we liked about this movie that we have not yet mentioned?
Oh, liked. The end credits.
We'll do disliked in a minute.
That was pretty sweet.
Yep. Being able to turn this movie off.
That we like in this movie.
I tell you what, though, like, just to touch on the sort of anti-corporate thing again, one thing I thought was a very nice touch, although the fabric of it looked incredibly uncomfortable to wear, like, the costumes in the movie, but like people's everyday clothing just like plastered with company logos. I just thought that was a brilliant touch, and like I don't think
Maya Rudolph's her outfit in particular is just. It's really it's tight for a dress. Whatever she's wearing at the end of the movie, that's like tin foil with logos on it. She looks like the walls racing drivers stand in front of when they do speeches.
Yes, if it wasn't like a uniform, like if it wasn't the uniform, like the cops or the prison guys or the lawyers, and it was like everyday clothing. It was plastered with company logos.
Yeah. There's a bit of truth there. It's maybe there's not a lot more to like in this movie. Would seem to be the consensus.
We're scraping here.
I'm going to go back to hate.
I have just one last point about. I said one last point. I have a hate point. We are lucky, of course, and this movie tells us that Luke Wilson is not the bottom of the Wilson acting barrel. because the older brother is in this movie, the older Wilson brother, whose name I don't even know. You know where there's that rehabilitation prison guard at the end that he fights with the flamethrower. He has no lines.
Beef.
Beef Wilson.
He's called Beef something, isn't he?
Yeah, sorry, the guy in the movie. Yeah.
Hold on, let me find it. He's called
that
Beef.
that is the older brother. That is the older Wilson brother.
He's called Beef Supreme.
Beef Supreme.
That's quite funny, isn't it? It's called Beef Supreme.
Yeah.
So that's actually his brother.
Yeah, that is. I'll find his first name.
Wow.
Andrew Wilson. Andrew
Wilson.
And you know what? He has he does not even scream, an obscenity in this movie. So, like, he must be a pretty bad actor if he couldn't even steal a line in his brother's movie.
When I first saw him, I thought it was Sean William Scott.
He does have a look to him, doesn't he?
It's that blonde hair and the stubbly beard.
He doesn't have the biggest IMDb record.
No, because he's only it. But if you can't score a fucking line in your brother's motion picture, maybe choose a different career, man. So there is that.
I have one other hit point.
Terrible, don't get me wrong.
I have one other hit point.
Please don't steal mine.
Oh well, I might. It's the language, and I don't mean the bad language like fucking shit and all. But 15 minutes into this movie, we got our first faggy, and then the movie just continues to talk about how the main character
dropping the F-bomb like it's going out of fashion, and it was going out of fashion, to be fair. But like, my God,
I don't remember saying faggy in 2006. Like, fuck it, come on, guys. Retarded as well. We loads of that. We just loved that in the mid 2000s, didn't we? It was just brilliant, and I think maybe certain sections of America still do.
I think this movie gets that from like Team America, South Park, that kind of like vibe, that kind of like in the year 1999, like you could maybe say, faggy or retarded, and it'd be like a what's the word? Not countercultural, but kind of like in a a more meaningful way. Whereas by 2006, if you are saying these words, like especially nowadays, if you said the words like this, you would be cancelled. Like if any celebrity said the F word, they're cancelled. That's it. You are no longer employed in Hollywood.
And that's a good thing.
Get the fuck out.
That's a good thing.
To harken back to the days for Dave.
We should retroactively cancel Luke Wilson.
Take him down.
I think time has taken care of that. It's for us.
He's got his millions of dollars. He's fine. One last thing, and it's actually quite a substantial thing that I really dislike in this film, is the narration. And I cannot understand.
I think it's necessary evil.
Didn't we talk about how
for
it's
this
the best
movie?
Bit of the movie. I'm not saying I don't hate it, Sam. But I'm just saying, didn't we talk about how it's the best bit of the movie?
I think it's a necessary evil.
Oh well, so I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with.
Paying attention.
I probably wasn't. But surely though, in a film that's like trying to ape the idea that people are stupid, and people, is trying to promote the idea that people are stupid and they can't follow even basic instructions, and all they watch is the violence channel and
the masturbation channel.
The masturbation channel.
Go away, Baton.
It's a good line. You can't argue with that. Surely we would trust the geniuses who are watching this film to be able to understand what's happening in front of them, and not require constant description of everything that's happening on the screen.
In the perfect movie, Sam, yes. But we did discuss how if it wasn't for the narration in this movie, there'd be a lot of stuff where you wouldn't realize what is actually going on. Because we were talking about how ineffectual Luke Wilson is, and we were saying like, thank God for the narration, because without it, if we were relying on the main character, we'd be up shit creek.
Can I read you? Can I read you one of the lines though? Because he said when he lands, when Owen Wilson lands in the future,
Luke.
He's walking. I know. He's walking around, and he's and he's like, in a daze, and it says, quote, unaware of what year it was, Joe wandered the streets, desperate for help. But the English language had deteriorated into a hybrid of hillbilly, valley girl, and inner city slang and various grunts. Joe was able to understand them, but when he spoke in an ordinary voice, he sounded pompous and faggy to them. And it's like, could you not have written some dialogue from maybe the people he was talking to, that he goes, hey guys, have you, and they do have this, but then they kind of like, the narration kind of takes over the scene. Hey guys, could you tell me where the
I
the
did
nearest...
touch on this earlier, Sam. It's like you weren't even present in the podcast.
Yeah.
I said earlier is that I agree, and I think that yes, but I don't think Luke Wilson could have carried that off. I don't think Luke Wilson could sell it, and I think they tried it your way. They tried writing lines, and either the writing wasn't good enough, or Luke Wilson literally cannot emote at all.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's.
Yeah, I remember us discussing it, but what I'm saying is, I am aware of the things that happen around me. What I'm saying is that the specific narration is just so poorly written. You know what I mean? Like, and there could be ways that you could actually have this in there if you want it, and then maybe actually, add something to the movie rather than just literally describing what's happening on the screen, and not necessarily have just that as a by itself.
Sam, you've quoted one of the lines from the narrator. Let me quote you one of the lines of dialogue here. This is the doctor, right? Kick ass. Well, don't want to sound like a dick or nothing, but it says on your chart that you're fucked up. You talk like a fag, and your shit's all retarded. What I do is just like what I mean, like. So. It's not exactly Shakespeare that we're dealing with here.
It's not really on that level, is it?
No.
We haven't lost
and I purposely chose that line just so we could see both ends of the spectrum on that.
Of the spectrum,
yeah. So I agree, Sam. Yes, the narration could be a hell of a lot better, but boy, does this movie benefit from it. Because it's the smartest person in the movie is this narration.
It's covering up the gaping hole. I mean, I guess to defend the guy who's in the Apple adverts, the doctor, whoever he is,
Justin
Long. I guess he's kind of meant to be stupid. Is that the point of the writing? Is he supposed to be thick?
That's the point of this movie, Sam.
Yeah.
I don't think this character is supposed to be stupid as such as like he exists within this incredibly stupid movie. So of course he's stupid.
It just doesn't take, does it? It just doesn't take. Yeah, which I think we've hammered to death now. But
yeah, and like I'm glad we watched this movie because now I never have to watch it again, which is an important fact.
It was an hour and 24 minutes. I mean, like don't complain to me. Don't complain to me ever again. Ross is sealing his lips.
He's not going to get at you for that.
2 hour, 58 minutes. Next movie, guaranteed.
I thought you were going to reference the Snyder Cut.
So I've forgotten about that, Ross.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Your trial for war crimes is still pending.
That mini-series I watched in fucking one go. Fuck me.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've said all we need to say about this movie. So let's all get out of here because I'll treat us all to a full body latte down at Starbucks.
It's a good joke.
Go away.
Can't argue with it. Good ending. Well done.